Hey guys, welcome back. Alright, so it's been a while since I've done the video, so this is going to be kind of just like a quick update and a little bit of like a progress video of what I've gotten so far done. The car is for the most part kind of done. I've driven it out on the road, she drives great, she sounds great. It's really just kind of like little things left to do. Right now I took the wheels off, I was going around fixing all the curb rash. I used a flat black scratch and fix pen, and for the most part it worked fairly well. So all the little curb rashes, this one was pretty bad, this one was the worst, but it fixed pretty much most of it. Like that one, it at least blended in good enough to where you can't really tell. So up close, yeah, you can see it's curb rash and it's just painted over, but I mean from far away you can't really tell, so that's not too bad. Over here I finally swapped out that broken airbox, so I got another one of those, swapped out that bottom portion. I was gonna swap out the intake, but I wasn't able to do that right away because I had to order the sound tube delete little thing. Because on this one, because this one's a 15 and up intake, which just happens to fit perfectly fine, but the plug on here, I couldn't get that off, and I don't want to try to force it. So what I ended up doing is I just bought that little sound tube delete thing, and this thing's gonna be ready to go because this one has extra little plugs for vacuum lines and stuff like that, which I just want to make it look a little bit cleaner, and this is gonna help do that. About a week or two ago, when I was driving it out, trying to get the brakes broken in again, wear them so that they're nice and smooth, ready to use. The reservoir was cracked, and it wasn't noticeable until I was driving it around, and then the coolant, heated up. It's warm, it's operating at temperature, so it built up pressure inside of the reservoir. So the reservoir actually was cracked, and at first I thought it was this section right here, the nipple that comes out the bottom, and I had looked in there, and this little metal sleeve in there was bent. So that's what I thought it was. So I pulled that sleeve out, straightened it out. It's still a little wonky, but it's straighter than what it was. Slid it back on, put it back in there, filled it, pressure tested it, still leaking. I thought it was the hose or something, so I put it tighter. And then when I pressure tested it again, looked at it closer, realized this right here, which at first glance, actually I already forgot where it was, right there I think, doesn't look too bad, it just looks like a stress, kind of like flexing. It was actually cracked, so it was leaking from there. So this reservoir was pretty much toast. So I ended up having to get another one. This one actually came off at 13. That was at the junkyard, and it was very dirty. It's like very yellow, a little bit more yellow than that one, but I wanted to try to clean it, but after a while I kind of just gave up on it. Didn't want to really deal with it, so I just threw it on there, filled the coolant, pressure tested it, held beautifully. So the coolant system's good to go. There's no leaks anywhere. After that, because I had it running and I was sitting in the car when I saw the temperature meter just shoot up and basically peg high, and even threw the over temperature warning on there, I immediately turned it off. The driveway was cooling all over the floor, and I saw the reservoir was full because it drew air, so it just basically completely filled the reservoir with coolant because it wasn't pulling any coolant into the engine. So that was a little scary. Turned it off, put the fan on it, cooled it down, let it sit for a little bit, and then that's when I saw that the reservoir was bad. Well, I didn't know it was a reservoir yet until after I did the whole coolant pressure test, but I let it cool down, then I pulled it into the garage and kind of let it sit there until I got a tester so I can check the coolant system, make sure it was all good, or try to find the issue. So once I fixed that, I made sure to test the block, make sure the block was fine, nothing happened to it. So I got the compression tester, hooked it up to all 8 cylinders. They all read roughly about 150, between like 148 to 151 is about where they read. So they read pretty much exactly right next to each other. They're all perfectly exactly 150. While I did that, I also swapped out the spark plugs. I didn't know this, but apparently from the factory these came with iridium plugs, and over the years they swapped to the factory replacement. Instead of being iridium, double platinum. So when I went to get new ones, they weren't iridium, but they were platinum. So that's the only thing that changed in this. These are running platinum now instead of iridium. So I guess the spark plugs are from factory, which 41,000 miles is not too bad. But it has new spark plugs now. Coils are all still good. And then along with the airbox and this intake, I also got these valve covers, I guess. I don't know if that's what you call them. But the covers for the valve covers. And originally they didn't come with them, and I wasn't really looking to get them. But it came as a package deal, so it wasn't bad. It was a good deal to get them all together. I even got another intake just in case this one was bad. I do get some kind of sound from it. I don't know if that's normal. I haven't heard it from anyone, but I have another intake to replace this one just in case it is bad. And I got all of it for a really good price, so it wasn't really a bad deal. It was too good to pass up. I put those on, looking good, nice and clean. Well, they need a little bit of cleaning, but overall they're not too bad. I also noticed down here, I don't know if you can really tell over here, but the throttle body around there, you can kind of tell it did get bent a little. So down there in the throttle body, the little connection that goes to the throttle body actually did get bent a little, and there is a little bit of a stress crack right there. Throttle body works fine and everything though, except the wiring. Some of the wiring was damaged, so I had to cut the damaged wiring, splice in a new wire to it, and then wrap it all up again. Now that's good to go. Over here, the box for the speedometer. So I got this one. I just used double-sided tape, taped it on there. This one I wasn't really able to kind of like set it down somewhere because the ground cable doesn't reach far enough for this to sit flat. So I'm gonna have to make some modifications to this so that way I can kind of like set it somewhere where it's gonna sit for the rest of the time. Still need to fix the right headlight. It's not turning on, along with the left blinker. It won't stay on with the parking lights on, but that can wait until later. Doesn't really affect the drivability, at least during the day. There's something that's drawing current from the car overnight, so the battery kind of slowly dies. It could be that the battery's bad. It could be that something that I don't have connected yet is causing it to lose power. I still need to hook up the horn actually, so once I get that horn hooked up, I can have a horn now, because this doesn't have a horn, so it's a little sketchy, but not too bad. The license plate and the side marker lights on the bumper aren't hooked up yet, so I just need to do that. I still need to finish up modifying the door so I get the trim installed, but I mean, same thing, it doesn't really affect the driving, so I'm not too worried about that. Got the wheels off to fix all the curb rash, but at the same time I need to re-lubricate the brakes because they're kind of just really quickly lubricated, but there's still a few things I need to do in them because they are making noise. And also at the same time some rust did build up on it, and I want to clean some of it off and hopefully try to keep it from coming back. I do have to replace the rear pads. They are actually kind of chipping, so the pad itself isn't smooth, like near the center sections it is kind of chipped. I don't know if they're beyond usable. Like the left one, this front one looks okay. This one looks like it has a pretty considerable chunk out of it. On the left though, the ones on the left rear are a little bit worse. This one you can't see, it has a huge chunk missing out of it, and the inner pad actually it's getting close to the groove. The groove is almost actually gone. So probably just gonna get new pads for these. It won't be too bad. I measured the thickness of the rotors to see how much life is left on them. They're within 2 millimeters of their minimum thickness, so they'll be good for a little bit longer. That's not too big of an issue. I think we'll just go from there. So once I get all that done, finish up in here, I made these custom grommets. So it's the OEM grommet from the 06, well the 05 to 09, and it still has the original grommet from the 11. And I kind of just cut up the OEM one from the 06, and then just made it so that way it'll mate up perfectly fine with this. So that holds up fine, but I want to kind of try to seal it up either with like some plastic cement or some epoxy or something, weather sealant, something kind of like to make sure it'll hold and it'll be watertight. And it's the same thing on the driver's side. Lastly, the project I'm working on right now, actually, this is the BMR Watts link. So this is going to help definitely handle a lot better. To remove the panhard bar and the panhard bar support, throw this bad boy on, get the brakes lubricated, throw them all back on, throw the wheels back on, make sure I remember to put the fenders up front, and she's pretty much good to go. Then reinstall the airbags on all the seats. I might have to get the SRS module sent off to get the codes cleared. I do also still need, which I can't really see anymore because it's covering up, but underneath this cover there's a plug in there that's supposed to go to the front crash sensor. I still need a new one of those. So once I replace that, for the most part, all the electrical stuff should be good to go. Hopefully here soon the track season comes back and I'll be able to take it to the track and see how well she handles with the Watts link. Actually test it out. But as far as right now, everything handles pretty well. I might have to swap out the clutch. I'll test it out later. Same thing with the slave cylinder. So far it's been doing fine, but just in case in the future, I'll probably get a newer clutch and replace that just in case. All right, and over here with the donor car, it's pretty much just a shell now. The only unfortunate part is around here, you have to have the title to scrap a car, which I did not get, and it'd probably be more effort than any to try to get it. So what I'm doing is I'm probably just gonna tear this thing apart and then salvage what I can off of it. So remove the doors, remove the trunk, probably take all the bolts and screws and everything out of here, save those. If there's a way to pull the dynamo off this car and save it, I might try to do that. This quarter window is good, so I can take this off and save it. Same with the back windshield. Try to pull that off, save it. Those are pretty expensive. The front one's cracked, so that's not going to be salvageable. That's fine. Not too big of an issue. And lastly over here, the original engine from my V6 Mustang, the XCharger. This is going to start getting worked on here soon. So the plans for this is to remove everything, tear apart the engine, see how bad the damage is, see if it's fixable. And depending on how bad it is, I may either fix it up, may even throw in this and make a little cart. That'd be kind of cool. Or if it's too much effort or I don't want to go into rebuilding the engine, then pull off the supercharger, everything that came with it. So the wiring, I'm probably gonna have to sell the wiring with it, or try to either cut it and like include new parts with it to try to attach it to make a new kit from it. The fuel injector, spark plugs, everything that came with it, pretty much put it in the box and then sell it, whoever wants to buy it. For those of you that keep asking me if I'm gonna sell a kit, I'll let you know within the next few weeks once I start the teardown of this engine and then see how things go. So you guys can get an idea. If you want it, just hit me up and then we can start talking about the cost and shipping and all that's going to be included with it. Also, if anyone needs parts for an 05 to 09 Mustang, I have clearly a lot of excess parts that I'm not going to need. Trim pieces, I have the heater box, the exhaust off of it, which if someone wants to buy the kit and exhaust, I can do all that too. The brake booster, the drive shaft, the front end, all of that stuff can go with it. Whoever wants it, they can buy it off me, the dashboard, things like that. So if anyone's looking for any of those kind of parts, just let me know and we can talk about how much that's going to cost. All right guys, so it's 2 days later now actually. Yesterday morning I had finishing up tidying up the Watts link on the rear, double checked everything. It's slightly off, it's maybe like a little less than a quarter of an inch shifted to the left, but I left it as is because it's not going to be that big of an issue. It sits perfectly fine, for the most part leveled on both sides, but driving it felt good. It felt a lot more planted, it felt a lot more controllable. Right now it's currently set to the top setting, which is for steering response, and it definitely feels like it's a lot more responsive to like sudden changes to the steering wheel and how much it like corners. Definitely you are still able to lose traction, but if you just let off the gas a little bit when that happens, you can easily regain control of the car. It definitely is a huge upgrade to the S197 platform to kind of get rid of that solid rear end, the live axle kind of like sketchy feel that you get. So it's a huge improvement. Over here, I still have like all the ABS codes, the pump failure. So I got a replacement one. This is another used one as well. I got it for fairly cheap, so it's not too bad. If this one also still doesn't work, then I'll probably just upgrade to a newer ABS unit, maybe even like an upgraded one. We'll see how that turns out. But this one, I have the new ABS module and the new ABS, or the hydraulic control unit, which is this huge metal portion. And the module is obviously this back part right here. So I don't know if it's the module or the unit itself that's messed up, so I'm just going to replace both of them together. At the same time, I'm going to re-bleed the whole system again. So that's why I have this right here. I have these lines. I cut the end of the line, and then I put these hoses in there. These two hoses, you're going to disconnect those two brake lines that go into the booster right there. And I'm going to install those two onto the brake booster right underneath the reservoir. And then you're going to feed it back into the reservoir itself. Then you're just going to push on the brakes. And just like when you bleed your brakes, when you're bleeding the brake booster, you're going to do it pretty much the exact same way. You're going to push on the brake, and you're going to see fluid coming out of it, and then go back into the reservoir. And you're going to want to do that to get rid of any air in there. And then you just want to make sure that clear fluid comes out. So once I finish that up, swap out the ABS module with the new used one. Hopefully that one's better. Reconnect all the lines. I'm gonna bleed all 4 brakes again. I might end up having to replace all the brakes in general, and it might even be that the caliper itself are messed up. So in the scenario that the calipers are messed up, I still have the ones off of mine, which just so happen to be that they are exactly the same. But now that I think about it, I have the caliper bracket for the GT, but the caliper itself is still the V6 one. It's an adapter, so you can still use that one. So it might be a different size, maybe. I'll compare the two and see how they look. If it's compatible, then I'll probably just use that. If not, I might have to get a new one. So we'll see where I have to go from there once we swap out the ABS unit and bleed the whole system again. And then if not, I might just end up having to swap the pads. It could just be the pads are too badly damaged. The rotors aren't too bad. They have about 2 millimeters left of life, which should be enough until I get upgraded brakes for this. I don't want to commit money to getting new brakes for this just to swap out or upgrade in the future. So if I can salvage the rotors at least for a couple months, then it should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the lines off of the brake booster and then feed it to itself, bleed the brake booster, and then go from there, and then swap out the ABS unit, reconnect everything, and then we're going to go from there. Alright, so that was a little bit trickier than I was expecting. So to get this to work, I got the lines on there, but the lines, as you saw, were very long. So there's, if I can figure out where it went. So this one's the original line I was using on both, and it's way too long. So I took that one off, cut the other one in half, and then tried that. But even then, that was still too long. So I had to cut about this much off of both ends now, just so it'd be short enough to reach from there to there in the shortest length as possible. The reason you want that, the amount of pedal travel that the booster, that amount of fluid that'll accumulate and push out, you want to make sure that amount of fluid, let's say there's an air bubble right at that connection. You want that bubble to travel up the line through this clear hose into the reservoir. And if the line is too long, then it won't go through the tube into the reservoir, and it'll be stuck in this plastic tubing. So you want this tube to be as short as possible directly from that connection down there into the reservoir, and you want to make sure that the line is submerged in the brake fluid. That part is important. So once you have that set up and you have a friend help you push on the brakes, then they'll start pumping the brakes, and you'll see a whole bunch of air bubbles, maybe even some dirty brake fluid coming out of it. And they'll continuously keep pumping it until all those air bubbles come out and all the dirty brake fluid comes out, which for the dirty brake fluid, you're just going to have to continuously purge the whole system as much as possible. It's almost impossible to get it perfectly clean unless you purge the whole system. But for this right here, to bleed the brake booster, you just get this line really short, submerge it in the reservoir, and then get all the air bubbles and hopefully a majority of like the dirty fluid out. Now the only issue I'm running into now is once I remove these lines, these short lines from the booster, and reinstall the lines that go to the ABS unit, how I'm gonna get the air out of that system. So we'll see how that will work. I might have to put the system under a vacuum and try to siphon all of the air out as best as possible. So we'll see how that's gonna work out. But for now, I'm gonna remove the air box and this little trim piece I have here, and I'm gonna get around to removing the ABS module, installing this new used one, and then hooking it up, attaching all the lines. Then we're gonna bleed all 4 brakes again. So I'm gonna have to lift this up actually, now that I think about it. I might be able to reach them from the back, we'll see. I know for sure in the rear I can definitely probably get to it because the exhaust isn't installed right now, and there's enough room for me to crawl under there and kind of reach in there and probably take the bleed screw on. The front, I might be able to just turn the wheels to the side and be able to get enough clearance to get to the bleed screw or the bleed nipple to bleed the front brakes, and then get that side done. Once those are done, make sure everything's all hooked up, reconnect the reservoir. Actually, I guess I'm gonna have to reconnect the reservoir before I bleed the brakes, otherwise there's no source for the brake fluid for the pads that you're bleeding. And then hook up the scanner tool, and then we're gonna bleed the ABS unit. And then after I bleed the ABS unit, I might just, it doesn't say to bleed the brakes again, but I feel like you should. So I'll probably not bleed the brakes at first, test the brakes out, see how they feel. If they still feel mushy, then I'll bleed the brakes again. But the order it says to do is the brake booster, all 4 brakes, and then the ABS unit last. So I'm just gonna do it in the order that the workshop manual tells me to do, and then we're gonna go from there. Hopefully that works. Alright, sweet. We got the ABS unit out and the module with it. Used a lot of these rags just to get any fluid that was going to come out of it, which there was quite a bit. The big one that's like on the front outer side has the most fluid, so I had to kind of collect a lot of that with these rags. I had to kind of like fit a wrench in there. I took a 10mm wrench, one of these specifically, and I had to reach in there to loosen the bolts that hold the ABS unit down. And once I got that loose enough, it wasn't too bad. I was able to reach in there with my hand and then take them out, and then loosen the brake lines. Took the ABS unit out. There's a bit of brake fluid in it, so I just dumped it upside down there, put it right back up now. I got this one, this used new one. I've already loosened up all of these. Yep, loosened up all of these brake lines. So it should be ready to drop in and hopefully get the whole brake system situated. If not, I'm gonna just end up upgrading, stop dealing with the headaches with trying to see what works, what doesn't, and then we'll just go from there. Alright, so I don't know what it was about this ABS unit, but it went in a lot easier than the original one did when I was putting it on, with most of the body missing. And I don't know, but it just went in a lot easier. I was able to bolt it down to the bracket a lot easier, and then the lines themselves went into the hydraulic control unit. I was able to thread them by hand, and all I had to do was tighten them, snug them up with the wrench. There's no real fuss. There's nothing that got cross-threaded or anything like that. Just went in real smoothly. So now we're just gonna hook this up. There we go. All right. Snap them down. ABS, the unit module is connected. The hydraulic control unit, all the lines are plugged in. The one thing I have left to do is connect it to the reservoir again, and then I'll go ahead and bleed all 4 brakes again. Alright, so that got very messy. I packed a whole bunch of rags in there, literally as many as I could fit, just to try to contain all the fluid that was going to come out. So I kept the lines right next to it ready to go. As soon as I took off one of the short lines, I immediately went and then plugged in, or I guess hooked up the original brake line to the ABS unit, and then did the same thing for the second one, and then contained as much as the fluid coming out as best as possible. But it was still quite a bit. Aside from that, that's all good to go. So that's all hooked up again. As far as I can tell, the fluid's still pretty close to the top. It's about where it needs to be. So I'm about to pump the brakes and test how the brakes feel. Probably pop it in neutral and then roll it back and forth to see if it feels like the brakes are grabbing better now. And then after that, bleed the brakes, and then lastly bleed the ABS unit, and hopefully it does better from there. So I'm gonna do that, and then we'll see how it goes. Alright guys, so it's the next day. I finished it yesterday. I put on the ABS unit and actually read the instructions wrong, so I went through and looked at it again to make sure I looked at it clearly. So the section I was looking at was talking about component bleeding, so each different component. So there is the brake booster, the ABS unit, and the rear right hand brakes, and it talks about how to bleed each one. So in my case, since all of it was disconnected and there was no fluid in any of it, I just went through and did the bleeding for all of it again. So I bled the reservoir, or the brake booster, as you saw. And since I swapped out the ABS unit and did a new ABS unit, I went ahead and did that next. So I bled the ABS unit using the scan tool, pretty straightforward. And then I bled just the right hand rear brakes, hopefully to push out any air from the system. I might have to do all of them again, so I'm gonna start it up, taking a quick spin, and then test them out. It probably will need all other 3 corners for them to be bled, but I'm just gonna try to see how it feels right now and then go from there.